What's up, everybody? Just want to tell you how you can come support the show. You can meet us over on rockfin.com/Truthzilla. You create a free account. Please watch our episodes over there. Don't watch them on YouTube. I mean, come on. What are we doing
get
here?
Crypto?
Yeah, we get crypto just for you watching it. You know? So that's a great way to support the show. If you want to create a membership account, you can watch the premium episodes there and the premium episodes from all the other content creators like
Charlie Robinson.
Charlie Robinson, dude, all the people from the Union of the Unwanted over there for the most part, and some really awesome ones that I'm even exploring. Also sign up on patreon.com/Truthzilla. We're going to be dropping some premium content on there as well.
Aren't there other awesome shirts?
Yeah,
we have our own.
Yeah, so Truthzilla has some pretty amazing shirts. They're pretty awesome, dude. Like some of our friends in the business have some amazing shirts too, but I'd say ours are right up there. Yeah. Truthzilla.org/shirts. Go get yourself a hoodie. We got kid shirts. And then we got some new designs coming. Anyway, guys, enjoy the show.
Welcome to Truthzilla. I am Megan, sitting here with Scott and Ed. This week we are speaking with Alex Krainer, former hedge fund manager based in Monaco. He is the author of several books, including the heavily censored The Killing of William Browder, which has been banned and republished under the name Grand Deception. You can find his articles at thenakedhedgy.com. A fierce advocate of truth. You've heard him on the Ripple Effect podcast and the Union of the Unwanted. Alex, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and greetings to your followers and your listeners.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
They're gonna love this one because we're trying to look at this whole thing from different angles. You know, we've looked at the esoteric side, we've looked at the we've had a couple people to talk about the financials, doctors, nurses from a legal perspective, and we're just trying to get to the bottom of this thing. We're trying to get to the bottom of like why has this rolled out the way it has. What are the implications? What does this future look like? And, when we met you on the Union of the Unwanted, you had some really powerful things to say. And it seemed like you were really tuned in to, what it seems to be going on. And most of the people we talk to are here in the United States. So I don't know if we have like kind of a bubble around us, and it's hard for us to look big picture because we're always here bogged down arguing like Biden, Trump, and it's like, oh, that's such a hard little paradigm to get loose from, you know what I mean? So one of the things that I heard you mention is that just going all the way back, like there was some financial stuff going on in the financial world that maybe not a whole lot of people know about. Maybe in like 2019, I heard stuff about like the repo crisis, right? Things like this, like something like there was a collapse imminent that they needed to create some sort of crisis situation. Is that kind of what your take is on it?
Yeah, correct. So if your listeners are not familiar with the repo market, that's called repurchase. Repo stands for repurchase agreement. So basically, what happens is that every day at the end of the day, when the banks close their books, they have to have adequate reserves with the Federal Reserve Bank. And if they're short, if they come short, then banks routinely borrow money from each other in these very short-term repurchase agreements. So basically, let's say we close the books. I have some extra cash. You're a bit short, so you say like, "Hey, Alex, can you lend me $1 million, like a note, a bond, whatever, and I repurchase it from you tomorrow, or in a week, or in 10 days, or in 3 months, whatever." And so you lend me $1 million. I'll pay you back $1,050,000. And we do that, no problem. So that's easy, 50,000 for me. Squares your book, helps you square your books. And so this thing was going on as a routine thing for a long time. And then in September of 2019, the repo market broke, and we all noticed that we noticed it was headline news that the interest rates on these repo repurchase agreements suddenly spiked to like 10%. They used to be like 1-2%. And so then the Fed had to step in, and the Fed had to provide the liquidity for the banks that couldn't raise money in the repo market. So what that basically tells you is that, so if you ask me to lend you $1 million and I have them, and I know that, you know, tomorrow or in 3 days I'm going to get $1,050,000 from you, that's easy money for me. And the only reason why I would decline to lend you that money is because I think you may be bust. So I think that I'm not going to get paid back. So I say, you know what? I'll lend you $1 million, but you have to pay me back 1.1 million or even more, right? And so that was a sure sign that one or more banks in the system were basically insolvent.
Okay.
Well, at that point, to avoid the banking crisis, the Fed simply stepped in and they started providing a massive amount of liquidity to the banks into the repo market to make sure that we don't have another Lehman moment. And then this repo crisis just kept metastasizing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I think it started at something like $100 billion a week, of which maybe a quarter of that was used. The rest was just put there to be available, but it wasn't used. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that right now we are at about 5 trillion.
Oh, wow.
God.
God.
You know? And I don't know that all of it is being used, you know, like they're finding other facilities, other ways of making sure that the banking system stays solvent. But what was extremely, well, you know, like then the COVID crisis happened and everything changed because, you know, we went, I think there's been like a banking coup, you know, like a coup in the banking industry. And basically, okay, just to go back a few years, just to rewind a little bit. So in the hedge fund industry, most people, including me, expected that any day one of the big banks is going to collapse. And I think that the main candidates were Deutsche Bank, Societe Generale, and maybe HSBC. And so Deutsche Bank has been on the death watch since at least 2016, maybe even 2015. So this has been expected as an imminent event. You know, everybody was expecting, oh yeah, any day now, you know, it's gonna crash because these banks really are insolvent. And then nothing happened, and then the COVID crisis happened. You know, the lockdowns and the economic crash, and still no bank collapse. And then I realized, you know, like I grew up in the socialist Yugoslavia, and basically for as long as I can remember, we had stagflation. You know, we had high inflation and really poor economic growth. So basically, you have a recession environment, but you have consumer price inflation. And basically, I recall that, well, you know, like things were crappy, but we never had a banking crisis. We never had a banking crisis. There was no bank runs. So I'm like, how strange. So basically, I know what happened back then. I just didn't put it together with what we're living today. And basically what happened is that you had zombie companies in the socialist world. The government and the central bank just basically provided all the liquidity needed to cover the bad debts. So the companies that couldn't pay back their debts to the banks, which would basically collapse the bank, all of that was just being covered by printing more money, just the printing presses, monetizing the debt and carrying that forward. And basically what happened is that you had gradually accelerating inflation. So what happens essentially is that instead of the vested interest, the people who rule over us, instead of them taking a hit by their banking system collapsing, by their corporations imploding, they basically rip off everybody else in the system through inflation. So basically, you and I are going to be able to buy less and less and less stuff with the same amount of dollars or euros, but their systems will be kept alive by just giving them money. So, you know, basically you have the socialism for the banks and the large corporations. That's what you have. So that's been the coup, you know, that we are no longer in a competitive, call it free market environment. We are essentially in a socialist communist economic model. But of course, they're not telling you this. They're not telling us any of this. They're just doing it behind the stage, while, you know, the media are still talking as if things are going to get back to normal, as if, you know, but basically this coup has happened, and that's the reality in which we're living. And I think that the ultimately the effect of that is going to be inflation and the currency collapse.
Absolutely.
So I just have a question, just listening to all this, you know, it almost, and forgive my simplistic view of this, but, you know, just this almost seems like the playbook to me. I mean, I look back to 2008, and it's, I mean, let's just blow up the bubble and then we'll just pay ourselves out.
Yeah.
Right. That just seems to be like a recurring thing. And maybe you see it differently, but is this kind of the same thing we're seeing right now? Like here's the bubble in this repo market, and we're blowing it up. So it's just pay everybody out. And I mean, now we have, you know, the CARES Act and there's just multiple stimuluses happening over here. And I'm not sure what's happening around the world with this, but it just seems like we're just going to pay everybody out to kind of silence them. But all the big companies are just cashing in on this. All of our Amazons and Walmarts and, you know, all those guys they're just raking it in. So they throw us a bone here, but realistically they get to burst the bubble and pay themselves. And here's this inflation we get. Yeah.
Look, I think that this is going to probably end up being worse than 2008, 2009.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's going to play out differently because this time, I think with the Dodd-Frank legislation, the Fed can just intervene as they see fit, rather than having to go to Congress and then, you know, Hank Paulson begging for money on his knees in front of Nancy Pelosi. They're just doing it now. Yeah. So they are in charge. The dog and pony show in the House of Representatives and in the Senate is there for, you know, like as Frank Zappa said, you know, like it's the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex, yeah. But, you know, actually the banking and military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are such drastic, radical interventions into the economic and financial systems that you had to create you had to create a different kind of emergency to be able to carry this out. So, you know, how lucky for them that this virus came out, this deadly, scary, terrible virus that, you know, I don't know. I guess the four of us here are the lucky 99.8%.
Yeah, I don't know. And I've been, and like we go to every single possible mass gathering we could possibly go to with no masks and hug all kinds of people. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but what you don't know is that there's a new variant of this virus that actually you can get it. It kills you, and you don't know that you're dead. That's the.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm using that later today. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good meme. Yeah, like maybe we're all dead right now. Who knows? I died from the new strain last week. Man.
Because this virus is so devious that, you know, like you die, but you don't even know it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
My gosh, wow. That's the best thing I've heard.
Well, you got to get a test to see if you're dead, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God. That's hilarious. That's well, great. I love it. Man, and so, you know, we've known, you know, if you look into this stuff, you know, people that have been looking into this stuff for years, you know, whether it's the military or whether it's the, you know, the military-industrial complex and like false flag terrorism and warfare and just all that stuff, it all ties back to these financial institutions. Like we all know that they've been behind everything, but they've done a really good job of kind of concealing their involvement in this the whole time, and in fact portraying themselves as the good guys. Like, look at us, we're bailing everybody out. Like these financial institutions have been able to avoid scrutiny, I would say. Like that, you don't really hear about it very much, like in any sort of like alternative media. Well, definitely not the mainstream media, but alternative media, other than like you and I know the guys at like Liberty Advisor, like Tim Pashode and John Sneisen, you know, like there's people talking about it, but it's like it's not really getting any traction. And it's interesting too. Another parallel that I was just thinking of is just like, you know, in response to this, they've gone back and they've changed the way we've done things for so long. Like in the medical field, like we were talking briefly to Dr. Scott Jensen, and he was explaining how here in the United States they've changed how they write death certificates, you know, in order to make it so that, you know, the COVID, like the correlation and the causation are no longer, you know, it's not like he died of COVID. If you died of a heart attack and then you had COVID, like somehow that, you know, anyway, they changed the way that they wrote the death certificates. And it seems like even in the financial world, they've changed fundamentally how it works, you know, like just the fact that they don't, am I right about this? Like they don't have to keep reserves anymore. So this repo crisis that created this situation, like I was hearing somebody saying that they don't.
I think it was March of 2020 when they just removed the reserve requirements for banks altogether. They used to have to have 10%, right? And then they just removed it altogether. Is that still going on? I'm not sure. That's a question for you, Alex.
Yeah. I don't know.
There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that they don't really tell us. They don't really tell us. You have to kind of read their minutes of FOMC meetings, which I don't do, but you know, like some people do, and then I read their articles, and then you find out that, like, you know, everybody thought forever that the last time around the bailouts, you know, the bailouts in 2008, 2009 ended up being like $9 trillion, but then, you know, like you have to kind of dig to find out that there was a what's it called, the Office of Accounting. There's a Congressional Budget Office, or now it escapes me.
Yeah.
Office of Management and Budget, maybe. I forget.
That.
But anyway, you know, like they came out and they said, like, no, actually the bailouts were $16 trillion, not 9, 16 trillion. But then, you know, I read another analysis on the website called Wall Street on Parade, and they're very good at analyzing what's going on with the Fed and the Wall Street banks. And they cited an analysis that tallies it up to $29 trillion. I think these are staggering amounts of money, and you know, like it's not like it's real money in the sense that it comes out of your pocket, but it's money that they just create to cover their losses, but that ultimately ends up costing the whole society. You know, like it diminishes the wealth of the whole system, of the whole economy, everybody involved. And so I'm pretty sure that what we know about what's going on today is only the tip of the iceberg. And the things are so radical that they have to they're very serious about having to control the political process as well, because otherwise they would not be able to do it, and then their system would implode, and then we would have to come up with a completely new one instead. And so that at that juncture, you know, when everything is upturned, there's a risk that they lose control. And so they would rather put us all in concentration camps than lose control over the system that they have.
Sure.
So, you know, they have all these really, really ambitious objectives about controlling society, about controlling dissent, about, you know, making sure everybody has their vaccination certificate. You know, basically it's going the way of the Soviet Union. And you know, that makes life barely worth living, you know. And it's, you know, if you I don't know, you know, like if you read the Gulag Archipelago, then you realize how horrendous this could actually be. And then even if you think like, yeah, you know, like whatever, I think maybe it's easier for me to comply, to pretend to go along, and maybe just be left in peace. But you don't really have that option, because if you have children, or if you plan to have children, or if you have grandchildren, that's the choice you're making on their behalf, because they're going to inherit the mess you leave them. So we don't have the option. We have to push back. We have to decline to cooperate with this. And so, yeah, that's where we are. And I think that it's an amazing time, because we've been all kind of raised on stories about, like the Jedis and the Empire and the Lord of the Rings and all these Harry Potter, all these epic clashes between good and evil. And that is upon us now.
Yeah.
We are the resistance, for
this is what
sure.
we're living now.
It's powerful. What a time.
I think what you said about having children too. I know me and Megan have children. I mean, I think that drives me more than anything in wanting to fight against this thing, because I do not want to give the world that they're pushing right now to my children. I feel like a complete conviction to do everything in my power to fight against it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of the things you're talking about there too, though, just like relating to this, the Soviet Union and stuff. One of the things we've looked into is the 10 stages of genocide. I'll have Scott talk a little bit more about it. We made a little documentary, but if you look at where we're at with what's going on right now, like we're on the verge of a mass genocide.
I mean, if you look at it, you know what I mean? Like we can look at this from all types of different angles, and we've tried to be very objective about all sorts of things. And it was brought to my attention, this whole concept. So anyway, there's a organization called Genocide Watch, and it's Dr. Gregory Stanton. He has this proposal that there's 10 stages of genocide that occurs before every single event. Whether it's the Holocaust or Rwanda or Bosnia or Armenia, the Armenian genocide, like whatever it is, it always follows a very distinct pattern, and it's always about dehumanizing the target group. It's always about polarizing the community. So just divide and conquer, creating like laws and institutions that diminish the rights of the targeted group, and it just goes on and on from there. And it's just literally apartheid. Like apartheid, like one different rules for different classes of people, and we're literally at this stage where we're like we're at like it's arguable that we're at stage 7 or 8 as a world in the world,
Wow.
And the 9th stage is the actual extermination, and the 10th stage is the denial of the genocide, and so this is something that and it's just insane to think that. And if you bring this up to somebody that's just has no idea, like they think we're crazy, but it's like, but that's how scary it is, that's how scary it is, and like you said, they would much rather put us in concentration camps, or I would even argue they would much rather just exterminate the majority of us to keep their power. You don't think for a second that they wouldn't do that? Are you kidding me? Right. The number one cause of unnatural death for the last 100 years has been governments killing their own people. That's just what's going on. And I think in Western countries, I think it's just unheard of. But, here in the United States, I can tell you, it's so divided and polarized. And you can tell these people that have been lumped into this category of, people who are questioning the narrative, who don't wear the mask, who are against the vaccine, have been lumped into this category with all these other people that are white supremacists and domestic terrorists. You don't even have to be white here in this country. Yeah, QAnon. Yeah. You don't have to be a white person in this country to be a white supremacist. That's how crazy it's gotten. And so they're trying to label, and it's to the point now where literally if they rolled through our cities in vans, started rounding us up or just shooting us right in the street and saying, oh, he was a QAnon domestic terrorist, there would be people that would be celebrating it in the streets right now. It's so insane. Yeah. And I don't know. So it's just a weird thing to think about, but and I hope we're wrong. I hope we're dead wrong about all this stuff, but it's like, if you start looking into this stuff, it's like, Alex, it's hard to deny the evil that's going on in the world right now. Yeah, it's insane. Man.
And I would ask, how we do have a kind of an isolated view of the world being here in America. How is it over in Monaco? How is it around the world? Is it as divided?
I think it is divided, but it's kind of hard for me to say, because the circle of people that I'm close with, I don't think anybody really buys this story. I think it's so patently false. It's so patently incoherent.
Yes.
That nobody buys it. Now, it's true that many people can't really bring themselves to believe that there's something profoundly sinister about the whole agenda. And so they think like, oh yeah, there was a pandemic, there was a virus, now the measures, they're not right, but maybe, maybe they overreacted because they wanted to be extra careful and, some people still are, they're attached to the idea that they can trust their government. They're attached to the idea that they're not being lied to, because to come to terms with the fact that you've been lied to all your life, and that some of the biggest blocks of our, of the foundation on which we've been building our lives turn out to be complete lies. It's very scary. And then you don't even know what comes after all those lies collapse. So you remain kind of attached to those lies because they connect you to the world that you're familiar with.
Yes.
And then, one of the big lies that they've been feeding us for generations now is that we are essentially bad, that we need the authorities to keep us in check, because otherwise we'd all fall to each other's throat and kill each other over, anything to maximize our own individual advantages and benefits. And so, this overarching authority has made itself indispensable, and now people think like, if it's not like that, then it would be chaos, it would be anarchy. But I think that we are yet to discover who we are, because I tell people this metaphorically. I said, imagine if you were a chicken, and you were born in the chicken coop. You've never been out. Not only do you not know what it's like outside, you don't even know yourself who you are when you're outside of your cage. And so, many people are, anxious about that. I tend to be optimistic, I think that we are essentially good, and I think that we are capable of building a good, beautiful life if we are allowed to do it, in a kind of bottom-up fashion, where people simply make decisions about things that concern them in their immediate environment. I think even intergroup in individual conflicts, people tend to resolve them in a reasonable way rather than resorting to violence as a knee-jerk reaction. And so I think that we have the opportunity of building up a much better world, but it'll take a cultural tectonic change for that to really take hold, and for people to kind of muster the courage to say okay, this world before that's finished, that's collapsing, and we have to build a different model of coexistence.
But wouldn't you say that they're trying to control the messaging around that? I mean, that's the Great Reset, right?
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Is that it's like we as a society, as a people, need to wake up and step up and create these realities for ourselves, whether it's just in our own community. But no. I think the bad guys see that there needs to be a great big change too, and they've decided to take the reins themselves, right? The Great Reset. So here we are. I think it was Davos, the end of January, they started rolling this out, announcing it very publicly. But people still, like you said, one of the things that, for me, when someone comes up to me and they're like, oh, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. And I'm like, well, probably not going to do that. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, have you heard of the Great Reset? No. And I'm like, well, look into that. That's a good little entry point into, awakening people, But another thing that fascinates me too is here in the United States, we have CNN, MSNBC, these mainstream media outlets, Fox News even, you know what I mean? And I know several people who are they sit in front of that TV all day long. I just moved out of a house where the roommate would just literally sit in front and watch CNN he'd wake up about 11:30, he'd sit there and watch CNN from about noon until about 4 a.m, and then he'd go to bed. And while he was in bed, like, he'd sleep and he'd have the little phone laying next to him, like playing news broadcasts as he slept. Like, it was insane, dude. And so, and then I asked him, have you heard of the Great Reset? He's like, no. Had no idea about the Great Reset. I'm like, see, they're not telling you. So it's just so crazy. So it's a great thing to look into. But what's your take, or where is this headed as far as the Great Reset goes?
Well, I think that, the elites, the elites. I don't even like to call them elites anymore. I like to call them the parasite class.
Yep.
They have decided, as you said, to take reins into their own hands. But as I see it, their mission is impossibly ambitious. It's impossibly ambitious. This is like the story of Icarus, Basically, the more I look into what they have set themselves to accomplish, the more it looks like a demented fantasy. Like, with an overabundant use of force, they might be able to create some caricature of this future. But if you look in histories, great revolutions, you need a charismatic leader. You need somebody like Lenin, Pol Pot, Mao, whoever. You need somebody who can impose themselves as a charismatic leader that has credibility with a large segment of the population. Then you need a very inspirational, unifying ideology, which in the past, they had with Marxism and so forth. Or in Germany, you had Hitler with his Nazi ideology. And then you do need an enforcement army, whatever, police, army, National Guards, whatever. And even then, it's very, very hard to make it stick. So, for example, when the Soviet Union, when there was a Bolshevik coup in Russia, the Bolsheviks only were able to control Moscow and Leningrad, St. Petersburg, right? And they were unable to secure the rest of the country. So the Western, there was a heavy Western intervention. So there were American, British, Japanese, Czechoslovakian, huge amount of troops from abroad were sent to help the Bolsheviks secure the country, to secure the whole Trans-Siberian Railway, and it took a while for that to take hold. In spite of the fact that they had Trotsky, Lenin, they had Marxism as the unifying religion, they were able to control people with this story about how the Tsarist regime was decadent and exploiting them. It was barely 2 generations before that the serfs had been liberated. So they did come from a background of oppression. So they did have something to gain with the revolution. Fast forward 100 years, your charismatic leaders are who? I don't even know who is it Klaus Schwab? Is it Bill Gates?
No.
Everybody hates them. I mean, these people are not, inspirational leaders. There is no ideology. I mean, the whole ideological edifice of this is a deceit. It's the whole thing, and everybody sees through it. People are not sure which part is true and which part is lie, but everybody understands that the thing is rotten, full of holes like Swiss cheese. And then where are the troops going to come from? Like in Soviet Union, you knew that Western Europe, Britain, United States, they were controlled by the banking cabal, and so they sent the troops over to the Soviet Union. Where are the troops going to come from? So I don't see how they could possibly control that. And then they're fantasizing about these very advanced high technologies. And, like people get very worried when, like when they read articles and see people talking about AI, artificial intelligence, how it's going to control everything and so forth. And I just would like for people to understand that please relax about AI. It's not what they want you to believe it is. And I spent over 20 years working on AI applications, right? I was very deeply immersed in creating an AI program. And what I can tell you about that is that it's a lot of hard work. It's extremely maintenance heavy, and it's very fragile. So, to create any kind of a quality system to control some process is a lot of hard work that requires dedicated maintenance, that is fragile, and that ultimately fails if it isn't maintained properly. And you really come to a point where you have people working on this. They have to be motivated. They have to believe in the process they are creating. That's all very hard to do. And if an engineer, let's imagine that there's a software engineer working on these applications, and maybe he needs his job, he needs to pay his mortgage and send his kids to school, but nobody can really make him do his best. And it's enough for him to not document the program properly. And that's enough that when the next engineer comes into his place, when he opens the code, he's going to have no idea what he's looking at. And so, we've already seen examples where, Google wanted to help the Pentagon create AI applications for these Reaper drones, right? Because the drone pilots were burning out very, very quickly because they couldn't stand killing people they didn't know. So then Google was going to come in and create AI applications to do that in their stead, and then Google engineers practically rebelled and said, we're not working on this.
Wow.
So there is the element of human conscience and intent, which basically cuts the legs from under many of these things that they try to scare you with, like it's going to be in the Terminator movie. It's not going to be like the Terminator movie. And if you just think about how your Windows 10 operating system functions, imagine building something on top of that thing. How often is that going to crash?
Yeah. Well, that gives me hope. That gives me hope. Like, to think of it in those terms, like what they're trying to roll out is so preposterous and unrealistic. Like, yeah, you would need all this infrastructure that just doesn't, who would sign on to this? But I think that goes back to the other tentacle of this whole agenda is just all of the social engineering and all the cultural Marxism and the cancel culture and if you step out of line, you're racist. And if you, all those things, all those elements, that's to indoctrinate the next generation to maybe take up, or that's their intention, right? To indoctrinate them to the point where they'd be willing to take those positions, right? Because they're fighting against, all these evildoers, like all these anti-maskers.
Yeah, I was going to go to the same thing, that the kind of devil's advocate argument to this thing is that, it is the cancel culture. I mean, do they need an army when they've created their own army of people? I mean, just this last week, we've canceled, what was it, Pepe Le Pew,
Dr. Seuss,
Peter Pan, Dumbo.
They got rid of Peter Pan?
But they pull them off Disney Plus because, it's just consistent, But it's just, we're a year ago. If you would have said they're going to roll out this vaccine, I mean, we all said this, right? They're going to roll out this vaccine and they're going to try to make it mandatory, or they're going to have the corporations roll it out as mandatory, which seems a little more likely.
And if not, they'll put you in a camp if you don't take it.
People are screaming for this to be done right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in the rest of the world. Here, people in America are telling you, we need this mandatory. We need to get everybody on board, and they want them to do it. And, we are the resistance on this. We're the small resistance.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we're more than we think we are. I think we're the majority. We're the vast majority, but we've all been canceled and shut down and censored.
They've taken our power. They've taken our legs, and we're not sure how individually to rise up against it, even when we have all the knowledge, or even in small groups. But I think you made an excellent point with it being, the human consciousness getting in the way. And I think that the agenda is so diabolical and evil on the other side. It must be logically met with true humanity, with true organic humanity, and with people who are grounded in truth and have, ties to spirituality and understand that this is not to be stood for. So, you wording it that way is very hopeful, and it's very true.
And there's another thing that basically when they come with their pronouncement, with their measures, with the rhetoric and the propaganda, so of course they're making it look like resistance is futile. Like they're trying to bamboozle everybody in being so scared that like the only option is to go along with it. But if you pay very close attention to their, to these presentations and interviews, like if you look at the key people in the World Economic Forum, you can tell that they're very nervous. And I don't know if you noticed the guy they have there always, Yuval Harari, this Israeli sociologist, who kind of he's part of this creating this ideological construct around the Great Reset. And then he has this one speech where he's basically convincing people not to make the big mistake of liking themselves too much, And it's absolutely astonishing to watch the whole his whole case, because he goes back to how fascism came about, right, in Germany. And then he gives some completely nonsensical story about how fascism arose. But basically it comes down to like the way Hitler convinced the Germans is by presenting themselves with a fascist mirror. I'm not kidding you. And this is the guy they have speaking at World Economic Forum. And so he says, like, and then when people looked into the fascist mirror, they really liked what they see, because they were attached to the nation. And look at me, I'm very smart, I'm very, like, all these things. Like, being German meant something terribly important, blah, blah, blah. And so then he makes this whole preposterous case to come down to the point of saying, well, if somebody presents to you a mirror and you see something that you really like and is really appealing to you, you should smash that mirror. I'm not shitting you. I can't even repeat it word for word the way he puts it. But my point is, they are very afraid of us awakening. They're very afraid of us coming to terms with our own nature and, like finding out that we are not these rats, as this same guy calls the rest of humanity rats. That we're not that we are like sacred beings who belong here, right?
Yes.
We don't need to be kept in a chicken coop.
Right.
Yes. All this is our birthright. And that they are so nervous that they have to make these really contorted intellectual contrivances to tell you, hey, like if somebody appeals to you and you like what you hear about yourself and you think you like yourself, we'll smash that mirror right away. That's terrible because you're shit, trust us. And then also, people have started to figure out the currency system, which has been like this dark magic that nobody really understood, because the universities bent over backwards for us not to understand how the currency system was. And then, like you look at the speeches of Karsten's guy, the guy who is the head of the Bank of International Settlements, they're practically begging people not to invent their own currency system.
Yep.
You know, they're like, stop creating these new currencies. You know, like that's our job. We'll take care of that. You just like, you know. And then, you know, like you look at these articles that are coming out with Forbes and New York Times. They say like, don't do any critical thinking. Don't do any research.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
but they're, you know, like they are really trying hard to keep us convinced that we need to just depend on our shepherds and not think about it. And if our shepherds tell us that we're bad, that we deserve to be punished, and that we have to be, you know, muzzled and kept in house arrest, and that we should just obey that. And then look at all the, you know, like the symbolism, you know, the mask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Black Lives Matter, it was kneeling. So, you know, like you get on your knees and you put a mask over your face and so forth. So there's like a lot of these subtle, you know, to use their microaggressions that are used to kind of like corrode our own sense of worth.
Right.
You know, that tells me that they're very afraid of us, you know, and that they're very nervous, and that they're plastering us with all this bullshit to make sure we don't awaken. Tells me that they're very, very, very nervous.
Yeah, and that's absolutely part of the agenda too, all the way back to like Club of Rome. You know, they're talking about like like we need to create this in relation to the climate crisis, right? They're talking about how, well, the climate situation, right? Like about how it's you know, we need to create a new situation, and by with pollution, global warming, you know, then we make the enemy of humanity itself. And so now with this agenda, it takes it another step further, just very, you know, driving into our heads, you know, you little dirty little humans, you're just dirty and you're gross and you pollute and you got to stay 6 feet away, and it's just like diminishing our inherent value, you know, like you were talking about. It's so crazy.
So, Alex, I would just ask, you know, you kind of touched there for a second there. What do you think of like the growing cryptocurrency world? You know, Bitcoin and
Alternative
all this
currencies.
alternative.
Yeah.
I think we absolutely need alternative currencies, but I don't know about crypto because, you know, so as a subject of speculation, they've done phenomenally well in the last few years, right? Last 10 years, Bitcoin has made something like, it's compounded at over 200% a year. It's made more than 6 million% in gain. You know, people get very excited about this because, you know, everybody wants to make $1 million in their pajamas, you know.
Yeah.
That's normal, but, you know, as a solution to society's needs, as a mechanism of exchange, as a means of exchange, I don't know if they are. I don't know what futures crypto has, because, you know, it has its own vulnerabilities. It has its own problems that need to be ironed out. The technology itself is phenomenal. Whether any given cryptocurrency is going to emerge as like a real solution, I don't know. Maybe it's Bitcoin, maybe it's not Bitcoin, maybe it's some other one. But I think that, you know, like in the past, you know, Europe in the Middle Ages, the United States before 1863, when there was this some banking act passed in the United States.
1871.
There used to be always dual currency systems. So there was one like sovereign currency for the whole country, and then in the United States, every state had its own currency, and every bank could issue, you know, like its own currency, and that system worked extremely well. And then in Europe, you know, there was always the sovereign's currency, and there was, you know, regional and local currencies with which people transacted, you know. So the king collected taxes in his own currencies, but people transacted in other currencies because there wasn't enough of the sovereign currency to make the economy run.
Sure.
Today, I mean, there are many, many local regional currencies. Many people are setting up time banks, which is also a wonderful solution.
Mm-hmm.
There's cryptocurrencies. You know, there are solutions, but you know, we have to work out more fundamental problems. You know, because if you speak to 99% of economists today, the unspoken but assumed objective of economic policy is to achieve economic growth and full employment. Basically, pretty much that's it. You know, and you know, maybe improving standards of living and so forth. But we never question that. You know, like, do we want full employment? Is that important? Do we want unending economic growth? What does that mean even? You know, like if you, so there's this one hedge fund guy called Jeremy Grantham. He's kind of a well-known name in the hedge fund world. And so he made this case of like, okay, so suppose that at the time of Egyptian pharaohs, like I don't know when he put the time, and he said like, suppose that at that time, all of the humanity's possession fit in like 1 meter cube box. So 1 meter is 3 feet more or less. So a box of that size, like 3 by 3 by 3, right? 3 feet by 3. And he said, now suppose that wealth grows by 5% per year. And then he said, how much wealth would that represent by the time Jesus was born? And I think that the time frame he uses was about 3,000 years. And then the calculation is that it would be something like the volume corresponding to 27 galaxies.
Wow.
All right, something preposterously huge. And the point being is like you can't have economic growth compounding forever. And then that was Jesse.
Hey, Jesse.
So, okay, so
Hey, Jesse. What's up? Hello.
so Scott, Ed, and Megan.
Yeah. Hello from the United
to meet
States.
Hey.
Nice to meet you, buddy.
Hey, go.
Okay.
And so, you know, the point is that growth for the sake of growth doesn't make any sense at all. And employment for the sake of unemployment doesn't make any sense at all. And, you know, we had the late Graeber guy, what's his name? You know, he wrote Bullshit Jobs. I forget his first name, Graeber.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Dang
Yeah,
it.
he wrote Debt, the first 5,000 years. And he wrote a very, very famous good book called Bullshit Jobs. And he basically makes a very compelling case that something close to 35 to 40% of all jobs today in the market-oriented capitalist countries just serve no purpose whatsoever. That people who work in those jobs believe that there's no point to their jobs. But there's a lot of busy work. And so, you know, we have to answer the question, what is it that we want to achieve from economic policy? Do we want growth? Do we want full employment? Do we want prosperity? Do we want safe, wealthy communities? Do we want, you know, these are very, very important questions that we don't address because it's assumed that everybody agrees that it should be just growth, 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 employment, 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 and that's it. But there's a lot more to choose from, you know, there's a lot more to choose from. And I think that to make the correct choices, then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is it that we're about? What do we want? Who are we? You know, and so I think all these questions are coming to a head. We're going to have to address them. And we can't allow these parasite class to address them for us because they obviously have already made up their minds that most of us here are useless eaters, that we should vacate the real estate, and that they should arrange the world with whoever they deem worthy of staying there.
Wow. That's powerful. So Alex, I have one more question. I don't know if you guys have any more questions, but I got one more here. So we've been hedging our bets a lot in terms of like preparing for some sort of inevitable collapse, you know, whatever that looks like. And I was wondering, on your opinion and what you have seen, is this going to be, and I feel like we're starting to see this slow, gradual decline, right? And you said earlier about how it's going to be worse than 2008, right? Is this going to be just a slow, like frog in the boiling water type of scenario, and then we're all just going to eventually crash out? Or are we going to all wake up one day and then the ground's just going to have fallen out from under us? Like, what's the collapse going to look?
Will the dollar fall? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Like,
that's a big question.
That
will
would
the
be,
dollar fall? I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
How
Like,
far can they keep printing trillions of dollars and
Yeah.
giving it out to people with, until it doesn't exist anymore?
Is it especially specifically, yes, the dollar? Like, is it going to be just like a slow, gradual thing, or is it going to hit like an inflection point and the whole thing is just going to be game over? Is it going to be like a turn on a dime, like one day collapse, or is it going to be just slow misery?
Okay, so I would tell you I believe it's going to be a slow unwinding, except for one thing that I think is a real danger, and this real, it's related to what we've been talking about. That this whole agenda around the pandemic is kind of losing its steam. People are fatigued. People are not buying it, and so in order for them to push the whole reset agenda forward, they need stronger medicine. And I think that the stronger medicine is war. And as I'm kind of paying attention to this because this is kind of like one of my main concerns is that they're trying very hard to orchestrate a major war with either Russia or China or both. They've essentially announced it. And so if they manage to do that, then you might see sudden sharp collapse over a shorter period of time. But I think that I'm still kind of optimistic because, when you look at the genesis of World War I and World War II, you see that, the agenda was run by British intelligence and the British diplomacy predominantly. And you see that the foreign leader that they were kind of lobbying into this war were not prepared. They didn't see through the game. They were not terribly sophisticated. Governments of France and Russia and Serbia and so forth were heavily infiltrated. And I think that today the main players in the world are very fully well aware of what the agenda is. So I'm not sure that they're going to take the bait. And I think that they're actually actively working on countering their scheming to orchestrate a war. And one of the things that I don't really know how this happens. I don't know how the messaging flows through the plumbing behind the scenes. But one of the things that absolutely astounded me was that Russia was the first that came out with a vaccine for coronavirus. And as I kind of pay attention to Russian government's policy, I see that they're very sophisticated. They're very, very sophisticated. They have very good advisors. They have very, very effective intelligence in most Western countries. They're paying close attention to what's going on, and that's why in many of these schemes they're several steps ahead of the game. So one thing that I was very surprised to see was that Russia completely went along with this corona pandemic, even though, for example, Belarus didn't.
Yes.
They said this is all nonsense. So it was obvious that it was nonsense, but Russians went along with it anyway. So I was disappointed. I felt like, what is this all about? And then they came out with a vaccine, which means that they understood that there was the agenda was, oh, we come out with a vaccine, we vaccinate 7 billion people in the world. And so the Russians come out, oh yeah, we have a vaccine as well. Well, now what, like, are you going to do vaccine certificates and passports? Well, what's it going to say? Is it going to say Pfizer? Is it going to say Moderna? Is it going to say Sputnik? So it complicates the agenda for these the World Economic Forum people.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I'm optimistic, but also to come back on the decline. I think, as I look at the American people, I think that they have been awakening. They have wisened up. They did not give up the Second Amendment.
Yes.
I think they understood that they need to go back to, recultivating their skills and growing food. So, like, I think that when things get tight in the sense that maybe your Walmart closes, and like there's a lot of areas in the United States that are food deserts. If Walmart closes, everything that's around it is golf courses and there's nowhere to produce food. But I see that people are organizing, and then in a very quick, maybe a season or two, the food production takes off, and people will figure out a way to exchange, because like the dollar is just a means of exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And even if the dollar disappears, the stuff to exchange is there. Like people grow food, the baker can make bread, like the farmer can make wheat. It's just a question of, if I get wheat from the farmer and I make bread, what am I going to exchange it for?
Sure.
And people figure it out. So there's already cryptocurrencies. I think many Americans have been buying silver and gold coins because they know this stuff is coming.
Yeah.
And then, people are going to organize regional currencies that they did in Germany in 1921-22 when the German Reichs, German mark had hyperinflation. People very quickly organized regional and local currency. So it's going to be okay. It's just not everybody's going to come through.
Yeah.
Right.
But I wouldn't be terribly pessimistic, and I think that when we come out on the other side, it's going to be a better world.
A better world.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Right there. Yeah.
We always say we're building our own better. That's what we're doing, right? We're part of Freedom Cells, and we're learning the skills you're talking about. So.
Yep.
And another thing, just forgive me that I interrupt, but this is something because like I've thought a lot about prepping, and it doesn't like people are buying these dehydrated foods and ammunition, and to prep properly, you need to organize communities of at least 100 to 150 households. Because you can't do everything yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you need somebody in the community that knows how to fix cars. You need somebody who knows how to fix teeth. You need somebody who knows how to butcher an animal. You need somebody how to fix shoes and so forth. So the prepping should be thought of as a community effort rather than, people building a barricade and an underground shelter with lots of dry food,
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we've been involved with and our listeners get to hear about this almost every episode, but that's all right. It's good to give updates. But Freedom Cells, the Freedom Cells movement, freedomcells.org. I don't know if you've heard of that. I know it's a worldwide movement, but basically you just go there and see if there's a little cell of people in your area. And if there isn't one, I would suggest starting one. And then there wasn't one in our area. We went up to like one of the major cities in our state up in Portland, Oregon, because we're a couple hours south of Portland. Here, we went up there and started joining, and we went to some of their meetups and got to know all of them, and then we came back down here and started our own, and now we've got like this vibrant community of people who are coming together, and we meet every other week, and we've been like doing like farm tours and learning how to, I don't know, it's been a really awesome experience, and right now we're just kind of just building like what you described, just community and fellowship, and so
that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Have you guys looked into time banks?
Time bank. So that's just like, I'll do some work for you, you do some work for me type of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. I know up in Portland, they have like that in place already. We're still just trying to get our stuff going, but that's a great suggestion for sure.
That's apparently a very good community builder because, like people get to know each other better.
Yeah.
And I think that there's people who have created like open source software for that. So it's like dead easy to like create create a database
Okay.
to run the thing. So another useful thing to consider.
Absolutely. Awesome, Alex. Well, man, thank you so much. Can you
It was a pleasure.
you want to let our listeners know where they can find you or read more of your work?
So yeah, I write a blog at thenakedhedge.com. I have also a professional website, but that's like for traders and investors. So it's called iSystem Trend Following, isystem-tf.com, where I also write. And then my book about the Russian sanction and Magnitsky Act and all that, which kind of is relevant to all of these things that we're talking about, because I've tried to unmask the network that's trying to orchestrate this war between Russia and the West. That's on Red Pill Press, called Grand Deception. So that's about it for now.
Awesome. Oh man, Alex, you're a wealth of knowledge, man. I hope people go.
So much.
Yeah, I hope people go check out your stuff. So
my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and all the best to all your listeners and all your followers.
Yes.
And hey, whenever let's do this again one time.
We'll check in for sure.
Definitely.
All right, Alex.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care. Have a good night.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye. Bye.
All right, everybody, that was Alex Krainer. Please go and find him.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting in with us. And until next time, I am Megan, sitting here with Scott and Ed. We wish all of you intellectual prosperity. Good night.
Beep, 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 beep.
Ding, ding.
Ding ding.